The next conservative president will enter office on January 20th, 2025 with a simple choice: greatness or failure. It will be a daunting test, but no more so than every other generation of Americans has faced and passed. The conservative promise represents the best effort of the conservative movement in 2023 and the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. Yeah, taking the reins of government. Just, man. Okay. Um, I think I might read this off stream and try and synthesize it for you guys. Because it's going to be a long read, but we'll go over this Paul Dan's interview. And fuck this guy.
.org. Washington Journal continues.
We are back with Paul Dans. He's a former administration official in President Trump's administration, and he'll be discussing the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, which is a policy vision for a potential Republican presidential administration. So, Paul, let's start here. And you're with the Heritage Foundation, but tell us about the project. Let's start there. What is it? What is its goals? And how is it being funded?
Sure. Well, just a little bit about me is I am formerly in the Trump administration at the Office of Personnel Management. I was Chief of Staff and White House Liaison. Before that, I had served with Dr. Carson at HUD. But I really am a Washington outsider. I'm an attorney who's practiced in...
Yeah. Dude's a Washington outsider who literally worked in Washington, D.C.
New York. And,
for the U.S. government.
You know, came to Washington, interested in politics, but very hard to break in. I came to lead this project at the Heritage Foundation because we're about bringing outsiders into Washington. This is really a plan for conservatives to be ready to hit the ground running day one, January 20th, 2025. And what we're inviting is a whole new group of Americans and inspiring them to come to Washington and serve. This is really the pathway. We've lined up what we believe in a policy book. We are recruiting people into a database. We're training people to tell them how the federal government functions and how they should function in government. And finally, we are drafting transition plans, all with a mind to advance the conservative agenda in 2025.
So beyond the Heritage Foundation, what other organizations are involved? And is it true that your budget is $22 million?
Well,
where does C-SPAN get its personalities? I'm genuinely curious here.
We're now 70 plus of the largest and most influential conservative organizations. Anyone interested can go to project2025.org.
Right. He's upfront and honest because there's nothing illegal about what he's doing. You know? There's nothing at all illegal about his positions, what he's doing, or the plans. You know, there's nothing at all wrong with what is happening. Sorry, 1 second. What the fuck is happening? There we go. Goodness, that was weird. But he's not doing anything illegal. He's not doing anything wrong. You know, like, it's totally legal to just out in the open plot to, you know, hire your guys in the U.S. government.
And in our coalition About Us, you can read, these are all the stalwarts of the conservative movement. It's hard for me to tick off all 70, but you see Leadership Institute, ACLJ, Conservative Partnership Institute, America First Legal, and kind of down the line. But this is a huge coalition, and the movement has never come together before like this to systematically prepare.
So I want to give our viewers our phone numbers because in a minute we're going to open up the phone lines for your questions for Paul Dans or your comments about this 2025 Presidential Transition Project. So you can start calling in now. Democrats, 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. Independents, 202-748-8002. You can also send us a text message, 202-748-8003. But before we go to the phone lines, I want to bring up, as you know, the Associated Press had one of the first big articles about the Presidential Transition Project. And I want to read an excerpt from, if I can, an excerpt from the Associated Press. It talks about your project, and it says in part, the far-reaching effort is essentially a government in waiting for the former president's return or any candidate who aligns with their ideals and can defeat President Joe Biden in 2024. With the nearly 1,000-page Project 2025 handbook and an army of Americans, the idea is to have the civic infrastructure in place on day one to commandeer, reshape, and do away with what Republicans deride as the deep state bureaucracy, in part by firing as many as 50,000 federal workers. That's a lot in just one paragraph. So, number one, do you think that's a fair assessment of the gist of what you guys are trying to do?
Well, it's probably larger than a handbook, but I would say, look, what we're here is to have a 1 in 100-year chance to really reform federal government. It's broken right now. And what conservatives are doing are actually preparing ahead of time to hit the ground running. This is a very complex government. It's 2.2 million workers, and the president typically only appoints 4,000. That's an incredible management ratio. If those 4,000 people aren't ready to start day one, it's downhill from there. So this project is really to get them in place. You know, it's not firing 50,000 workers, but it's making 50,000 workers accountable to the president.
Oh, yeah, that's so much better. Is just, yeah, let's just have 50,000 people that are directly under the command of the president. Yeah, okay, bud. That seems worse somehow.
Ultimately, our whole government is by consent. You know, it's a government of the consent. So when we send the president to Washington, he or she is working for the people and needs to direct policy through that voice of the people. So the government and its bureaucracy is there to implement the president's agenda, and that's what we're trying to work on.
And so the 50,000, right now, they're federal workers, career service workers that are harder to fire. So part of this proposal is to make them basically at-will presidential appointees if you guys were to have your way. Is that correct?
Well, it's to make them accountable.
What does
federal
that mean,
workforce, believe it or not,
dipshit?
has a dismissal rate, non-military, of under 1%. Think about that. Anyone listening here, think about your company couldn't dismiss more than 1% of its workforce. So you essentially...
Wait, but it's not, oh, well, they can only fire 1% of the workforce. No, they fire so few people because the people who are hired are doing the job they were hired to do. And they're doing it well enough that they're not getting fired for it. Like, imagine this argument. We need higher labor turnover rates. What are you talking about?
essentially have lifetime tenure for federal employees, which the only way you can manage people with lifetime tenure is measure their performance. But if their performance isn't being adequately measured, they're not going to be responding to political direction. So ultimately what we want to do is make sure that the federal bureaucracy is being directed by the people through the president and his team.
How is this guy the head of this evil project? He's such a mumbly dipshit. Again, fascists don't need to be competent, and this guy is proof.
And as you guys are preparing for this, What lessons did you learn from President Trump's transition that maybe are informing this new project?
A lot. You know, President Trump was an outsider. This is a very insular city, so it's not going to be welcoming to outsiders. Outsiders have to come into this place prepared and know what the game is. You also need to be on the same page. That's why we got together and literally got 400 plus conservative scholars and thinkers, the majority of which are outside of heritage, to literally get in the same room and get on the same page and write a blueprint that's going to tell anyone coming into the administration, this is what the Department of Labor should look like after 4 years of successful conservative governance. This is what an approach to HUD should look like. So it's very important that people initially who come in to serve the president are...
It's weird how he's just not saying many specifics. That's so strange and bizarre.
...are in the same, they're aligned. And then two, you know, it's very forbidding to move down to Washington and crack into this place, especially when you don't have connections. But those are exactly the people we want to make change. We can't have a revolving door of kind of this Washington ecosystem because...
The revolving door of the Washington ecosystem is one that you guys set up. People like the Heritage Foundation foster that revolving door so that they can have more power in government, so that their business donors can have more power in government.
Everyone who depends on this place for survival is not going to move the country in the direction we need it to. There is a blob here that protects itself. So we need to tell people these are the rules of the road. This is, and you have to stand firm when you're going to be pressed. Finally, we have to actually identify the work and make sure we're ready to, almost as if a pilot comes into the cockpit and starts flicking down buttons. We have to do that the second, you know, the president drops his or her hand and says, "So help me God." You know, we take a lot of exception with Joe Biden, but the one thing I do credit his team with was being prepared. So they were signing things all week long the first week, and we are going to be doing the same. We are now in the course of drafting those executive orders and rethinking and identifying the stuff that needs to come down. We're not...
Yeah, but basically what they're saying is we think Trump is going to be very incompetent and unprepared, so we are going to prepare for him. Here is our wish list of wet dreams that we have that Donald Trump would do for us. We just want him to be able to go and sign all of these things. You know, we got 250 things for him to sign week 1. Let's go. You know, like that. That's what he's setting up here. He is setting up essentially the premise is that, like, Donald Trump is incompetent and can't be trusted to actually do things. And so we're gonna write all the words for him. It's essentially what these foundations do. These organizations, right? It's like ALEC, the American Legislative Executive Council. You know, a conglomeration of different business interests that would literally just write legislation for states to pass, and they did. They passed those states in those states. Like it's just nonstop corporate power grabs. That is what he is talking about here.
Not going to wait and do this in the 90 days between the election. We're going to be doing this as a team, as an entire movement, years ahead.
I want to bring you have the book in front of you, page 555. Here's an excerpt. I want to read it from you because let's talk about some of the policy proposals. So again, this is an excerpt where it talks about the role of the Justice Department. So it says, in politically contentious cases, assistant United States attorneys and other line prosecutors during conservative administrations seek to influence outcomes of cases not because of any legal deficiency in the case or policy being defended, but by refusing to take certain positions. This can cause the department to take positions that are inconsistent with the interests of the president and his appointees in other places throughout the administration. While the supervision of litigation is a DOJ responsibility, The department falls under the direct supervision and control of the President of the United States as a component of the executive branch. Thus, in putting aside criminal prosecutions that can warrant different treatment, litigation decisions must be made consistent with the President's agenda. Again, that's an excerpt from the book, the handbook.
The book.
Can you talk about, it sounds like you guys want to erase some of the firewalls that most presidents have put in place. But
Yeah, like this lady is like, you know, we pulled a couple quotes from the website. It sounds like you want to just enable people to commit crimes.
between the White House and the Department of Justice, making the Department of Justice less independent and more reflective of whatever the president wants at the time. Is that accurate?
Our entire plan is to recenter the government on its constitutional moorings. So, you know, actually, we carry a lot of us the actual Constitution here, sometimes in our pockets. But this, importantly, in Article 2, we have
Weirdly enough, they've never read it, though.
3 branches of government, obviously the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. There is now a 4th branch, unelected bureaucracy. That is a recent addition over the last 100 years through Woodrow Wilson, amplified through FDR and through the Great Society. That has now become a thing unto itself. So to get back to the original architecture, this brilliant design of the founders, the president is obviously vested the executive power in a president, and he also is charged with to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. So there, he is essentially the chief legal officer of the United States. The artifice that kind of insulated the DOJ post-Watergate, you know, is a growth of the administrative state. And what you now see is it's one up.
Yeah. You see, the Justice Department grew after Watergate, and all the crimes that happened to try and overthrow democracy when that happened. But you know, we need to make sure that the Justice Department is weak again, so that we can overthrow democracy.
The Biden DOJ is now purely weaponized against his political opponents, and this is where it's out of control. And Americans are seeing this in real time and getting it.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. Again, Democrats, 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. Independents, 202-748-8000.
Look, it's not that difficult to figure out who stole that guy's Riz, okay? It was clearly his ex-wife.
And 2, our first caller is Gar in Decatur, Georgia. Independent line.
Morning. Happy Labor Day weekend. Question to Mr. Dans. Joe Biden said it. He's a capitalist. I imagine the Heritage Foundation is also a capitalist. What is your group's position on K Street and money is speech? Thank you.
We are trying to deconstruct this administrative state in K Street. Thank you.
What's awful about this is that it really is hammering home the banality of evil, you know? Like, this guy is boring as shit, but what he's talking about is just blatantly evil, you know?
Mr. Goff, for the question. We are really
Thank you,
against Washington
Turf Terminator.
Inc.
I
as
appreciate
it stands. There's 50 states out there, and Washington is almost a foreign country. And it is a centerpiece of money and influence and power and media. And K Street is the purest embodiment of that. So as someone myself who has never been part of that kind of financial elite, we are basically more of a grassroots organization. This is the time for Americans, you know, whether you're in Decatur, Georgia, or in Illinois, or everywhere in between, to come to Washington and essentially get this government back. I like to say the lines about this land is your land, this land is our land. I know that anthem where it comes from, but you know, this government is your government. And it's only going to happen when everyday citizens come and take these jobs. What happened with Woodrow Wilson was a new belief in government that it should be run by technocrats, people who went to very
I'm sorry. Imagine how deeply conservative you have to be like, and the conservative party went wrong when Woodrow Wilson came along and handed the country to a bunch of technocrats, and we've never really recovered from that. Like this is just your grandpa like whispering creepy shit in your ear. The show.
very fancy schools and know better than kind of the rest of us. And that grew over 100 years. So now we have people running government, making decisions that affect everyday life, who actually have very little life experience. And, I can say as somebody who went, I have 2 degrees from MIT, undergrad and graduate.
How did you get degrees from MIT when you're this boring? Oh my god, dude.
I'm a product of the American dream. Both of my parents were the first, to go to college. Me and my brothers and sisters were the first in our family to speak English as our mother tongue. If we went to public schools, we've kind of lived this. And by the way, happy Labor Day. I want to also reach out. I was driving in here in the C-SPAN building. People may not realize it, but there is MEBA, and that was my grandfather's union. That's the Marine Engineers Benevolent.
And we will do everything possible within our conservative power to destroy the unions. Happy Labor Day, everybody.
Association. So, that's the sort of folks who were at sea for 40 years, and my grandfather was a merchant marine on the Murmansk run. So these are kind of patriots. This is working stock. We built this country. It's time to come back to Washington and make sure the government functions for us.
All right. Our next caller is John in North Carolina, Democratic line. What's your question or comment, John?
Yeah, my question is, or actually my comment first is that C-SPAN, when Biden was first in office, did a survey of the top presidents of the U.S., and Trump, who was very divisive during his tenure, ranked 41st along with Franklin Pierce. So he and Franklin Pierce share 41st. So you're going to pattern a government, which, by the way, there is no deep state. If there's a deep state, it's Republican-bented.
Oh, this poor good-natured Democrat. You fool. Watching C-SPAN, thinking that this guy's going to give a shit.
For example, Mitch McConnell not allowing
Hey, Surfer McGritty. Been a while. Where you been?
The Supreme Court to even be heard for a year prior to Obama leaving office. And yet when the Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, they couldn't wait to get somebody in there. Mitch McConnell's still in charge. And then the gerrymandering in all these different states, that's the deep state. The deep state is not a Democratic bent. And all of this about just trying to pattern a government after somebody so divisive as Trump. I mean, Trump is the only president who actually had pep rallies, campaign rallies after he was elected. And plus, he led the insurrection. So it's ridiculous to kind of pattern something like that. You're taking away people's rights. You're not doing it for the people.
Yeah, this is why you fascists are fucked. We're gonna be just as boring as you. And you'll die of boredom. Ha 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 ha.
That's just what I have to say. Bye.
Go ahead and respond.
Well, my feeling, thank you to the caller, is, well, I would say yes, Virginia, there is a deep state. Or in the caller's case, yes, North Carolina, there is a deep state. And it's very much, unfortunately, weaponized against conservatives. The federal bureaucracy, the statistics show 90%, 80-90% of political donations to Democrats. What we've seen now is actually, I think of conservatives as focused on God, country, and family. And now not government, but progressives spend 24 hours a day redesigning government. Now we see that government is now directed against God, directed against family.
Yeah, that's right. Hop on into the federal government, kids. We're going to kill God. I just can't, man.
Directed against this country. So it's our charge now to get back and take over the government. As far as, conservatives, and there's a conservative deep state, I kind of joke with friends, Hillary used to make the same claim, the vast right-wing conspiracy. And we used to say, ooh, cool, where do I find that? Because there is not. I tell you that conservatives are outnumbered here, I would say, on an order of 10 to 1. And what we're, in my humble opinion, doing here is for the first time organizing, coming together, bringing the conservative movement to basically put down its petty differences and really direct its power and its influence and the voice of the people towards making significant reform in government. And we're a coalition of 70 plus organizations. We invite more to join. We invite all these listeners. If this is appealing to you, go to project2025.org, sign up. We want people to come to Washington, join the database. This entire book, and even the caller can download it. It's free. It's free online. You can read all the chapters right there at project2025.org. And, I'm happy to come back when you've read some of the chapters, but I submit respectfully to you that there very much is a deep state. We saw that in the Russia. We continue to see.
We saw that when the presidential campaign of 2020 was investigated for doing crimes and people went to jail for lying about the crimes.
To see that today. And as far as President Trump, look, he's an outsider. We need an outsider to fix this place. It's not going to be fixed as Washington as usual. So I think, quite the opposite. Is extremely effective, but there's a big task in front of us.
Has your coalition talked about the prospect, talked with any of the other candidates, just in case President Trump is not the nominee and a different Republican wins the presidency? Have you talked with them? Are they willing? And even Trump, are the Republicans running for president express the willingness to embrace your plan?
Absolutely, and I should even back up. Our entire project is candidate agnostic, right? This is for the conservative standard bearer, and notwithstanding what the AP writes is not President Trump's plan. This is a conservative plan. We welcome President Trump, and we welcome any other person who has a bona fide, legitimate, expectation of becoming president, and that goes, to Robert Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi. Even, Joe Biden's welcome to these ideas. We don't have to wait till 2025. If he wants to, straighten up and fly right, he's welcome to it. These ideas are, we as a conservatives came together and we threw down the marker and said, this is what we believe in. And we are making, our book's called The Conservative Promise, because we are promising to you, the C-SPAN listener, you, the American, this is what we promise to do. And these are our plans. And we are going to get people in place to make it happen. So vote conservative, because we are going to deliver. And that's really, I think, unfortunately, what's setting off a lot of the liberal talking heads is the fact that the conservatives are kind of getting their act together.
All right, back to the phone lines. We're going to speak now.
Do you think he wrote this because his wife wouldn't listen to him anymore? I think he's booking the TV interviews because he's very lonely, okay?
With Marshall in Nashville, Tennessee, Republican line.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I would like to hit on just three things. First off, I want to push back a little bit on the dismantling of the government. I don't think it's going to be a dismantling of it. I think it's going to be a stopping of the dismantling of it. It kind of surprised me when you read that page, because when you read it, I said, oh, my God, I now know what Mayor Garland and Christopher Wray is doing. They're doing what Joe Biden wants them to do concerning President Trump. This man is being prosecuted by prosecutors and judges across this nation, every one of them, are liberal. So they're doing what President Biden wants them to do, which I guess from what he writes, that's what they should be doing.
Oh my god, it's a conspiracy! Everything makes sense now! Except any of it. This doesn't explain anything.
I kind of disagree with it because I feel that the rule of law ought to be obeyed before the dictates of a president. I want to ask you, because I know that you're working on the 2025 transition, but are you doing anything to shore up or to make sure that what happened in 2020 concerning the DOJ and the FBI willfully, knowingly, and intentionally interfering with the presidential election? Because right now, they're already talking about COVID. They're already talking about lockdowns. And I'm asking myself, what is the Democrat Party going to pull this time? They can't pull the Russia thing because we know that was false. They can't pull censorship because they've already done that. We already know that the FBI and the DOJ is working with them. What are your opinions on that? And is your organization doing anything to protect the vote of the American people, all people, Democrat and Republican, in 2024? And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your call. What you're expressing is what all of us feel, really. Many of us. We're a large coalition, so it's not just the Heritage Foundation. Heritage, we are putting the resources forward. We mentioned 22 million. That's aspirational. We are working towards that. But the real value in this are the hundreds, if thousands of people who are giving volunteer time for this effort. So, with respect to what are we doing for election integrity, I think all conservatives have to man the ramparts. And that's not just us here in Washington, but particularly everyone listening to this needs to go get involved in their precincts, get involved in their town, the Board of Elections, and monitor this. Look, it is weaponized from the DOJ. There's a distinction to be made.
Again, the underlying I know that this guy is the most boring motherfucker to ever exist, right? I get that. But he keep in mind what he's saying here is that, yeah, the DOJ is fully weaponized against conservatives, and therefore we need to fix it so that it doesn't go after conservatives. Effectively saying, let's just make sure the DOJ can't prosecute conservatives for doing crimes. The crimes that they're doing.
Between the president, faithfully executing the law, and at the same time taking this prosecutorial function of government and turning it into a persecution. Like, that's never happened in the history of this republic. And we've always, kind of relied on the better angels, if you will, to refrain from that. But, the gloves are off as far as the Democrats are concerned, and it's wholly weaponized. You say, well, why are there all these indictments now? Why did they wait to 2023 when the facts, if you will, should have been known to them as early as 2020? Well, it's obviously election interference. It's on an industrial scale. I think the good news is Americans get it. This is ultimately going to backfire. This is going to be, as I think President Obama used to say, a major teachable moment in American history, where Americans are going to see smack dab how this kind of cabal of folks in Washington weapon.
A cabal of folks in Washington. Interesting choice of words, considering that cabal is associated with Jews. Interesting word indeed.
Nice things to ultimately keep power to themselves and take it away from you guys in the 50 states.
All right, let's go back to the phone line.
Quietly
Natalie
JQing over here.
From Loxahatchee, Florida, independent line.
Good morning. I just want to say, first of all, that I'm a proud independent, and a formerly trained PhD in public administration. So my question for Mr. Dans is really about the structural changes that he would like to see in the government. My question is his plan or the plan of his foundation built for sustainability? And as the government transitions in that sustainability, if it changes hands to independent or conservative government, are there enough stop gaps or stop losses built into the plan to say, okay, now the government is moving in a way away from conservatism, and how does his plan provide, possible resolutions for that type of situation?
Sure, and thank you for a very thoughtful question. I would first, as far as the plan, direct, and I hope you'll find it interesting as a PhD in administration. Check out Chapter 3 of our book, where we talk about the personnel agencies, particularly OPM. That's co-authored by Don Devine, who some of the viewers may remember as Reagan's first Director of Office of Personnel Management, also my former colleague Dennis Kirk and myself. The point of this is that the bureaucracy, now this is it's on a 100-year anniversary really from the institution of it by Woodrow Wilson, its conception, has gone so far over that it's purely unaccountable to the people. And it's really unaccountable to any political management, Democrat or Republican. And the problem with that is that, like I said, the dismissal rate, part of hiring is also being able to fire. And the president and the people acting through the president really can do neither. What needs to be done here is a recognition that there are certain jobs that, for purposes of sustainability, I believe the caller said, or continuity is what we kind of term the continuity of government, should be superintended by your nonpartisan career public servant. The reality, though, is that there's an entire strata of jobs that are policy determinative, that make very important decisions. These are the things we hotly debate on the campaign trail, and those have to be determined by the president's folks. And if not by the president's folks, by a public servant who's willing to take political direction. And if he or she's not willing to take political direction, they have to be removed from that job. Ultimately, that is what morally underpins our government, that we are consent of the governed. We were sent here by Washington, by the people. And if you have a bureaucrat standing in the way of what the people just asked for, that is democracy dying. So what our plan really does is look at those policy positions, the 50 or 1,000 or so, and say they have to be accountable to the president.
All right, let's go to Indianapolis, Indiana now. Stevens calling on the Democratic line.
Morning. What I'm hearing from your Conservative Heritage Foundation guest this morning is that he or the conservatives want a Republican, Putinist, Stalinist style government in this country. And my belief is that the reason for this new government, as he describes it, is because of the blackening and the browning of America. And the restrictions.
I mean, the caller's not necessarily wrong. It's just not necessarily meeting him where the argument of his policy positions are.
Or people of color to vote. I mean, there is nothing wrong with what is going on in this country as far as the law. Trump attempted to control this entire government and as far as the judicial system. This is asinine, what I'm hearing.
True, caller. True. Well played.
Your response?
Well, it's interesting. A caller from Colorado. I'm the first generation of my family not to grow up in the housing project, and Dan's is obviously a Hispanic name. So my dad, and I don't know if the caller knows where Fort Lupton is. He stood up the first migrant health care clinic, and that transformed medicine. My dad was a worldwide recognized physician who ultimately was on the faculty at Johns Hopkins, and I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Carson when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. So he and Dr. Carson, my dad grew up in the Coldwater Flat in New York, and as I was saying, his father was at...
Man, imagine your dad grew up helping immigrants as a doctor, and like you become a Republican. Like, holy shit, dude.
See, this Trump, you know, with the colors labeling Trump, we are the people, we are brown people, we are black people. And our coalition is the Frederick Douglass Foundation. There's Project 21. This is going to...
Like you become one of the guys synonymous with the party that is putting like barbed wire wrapped buoys around like across rivers in order to drown and rip apart like women and children coming over the border. Yeah, good job. Good on you, bud.
Going to be a coalition of the willing who are ready to stand up and kind of say, take back America from the elites. As far as a Stalinist America, you look at Joe Biden, he's the one putting down...
I mean, people who can be Hispanic and have surnames that aren't Hispanic. That's a very plausible thing.
Down vaccine mandates. He's the one compelling federal workers, the armed forces, to take the jab or to police speech.
Take the jab.
As far as authoritarian, President Trump had appointed me to be president of, rather chairman of the National Capital Planning Commission here in Washington, and President Biden exercised his powers to remove me three weeks into my term. That never happened in Washington. He removed hundreds of other appointees. So the flex, if you will, is Biden's. We are only now catching up to it, and you know, two can kind of play that game. But to be sure, we are going to take the full powers of the president under the Constitution and exercise them on behalf of the people.
I want to read you something we received on Twitter from Chris in Sussex, New Jersey, who writes, "The origins of U.S. civil service laws began with the assassination of President Garfield. What you are proposing is a return to the partisan government culture which led to his murder. We need less partisan influence in government, not more. This plan, Will, is hyper-partisan lunacy." And before you respond, just...
Yep, 100%. Give whoever sent that a raise.
For background, which I'm sure you already know, but for those at home who don't, this is from the National Archives website. It's about the Pendleton Act of 1883. It says, approved on January 16, 1883, the Pendleton Act establishes a merit-based system of selecting government officials and supervising their work. Following the assassination of President James A. Garfield by a disgruntled job seeker, Congress passed the Pendleton Act in January of 1883. And it says the Pendleton Act provided that federal government jobs be awarded on the basis of merit and the government employees be selected through competitive exams. And you can read more about the Pendleton Act. Again, this is archives.gov, the National Archives website. So what is your response to Chris, who says getting rid of this civil or decreasing the number of civil service employees is a return to partisanship that the program was created to avoid?
Well, you know, Chris is right historically, but he needs to catch up on what happened in the last 100 years. We no longer have a merit system in place. Essentially, there is no civil service exam, Chris. People are recruited here almost generationally around Washington. As I mentioned before, 99% of the people essentially have lifetime tenure in the government. It's impossible, dare I say, to remove a bureaucrat short of them, you know, running around the office naked. And even there, they probably just go into a rubber room for years. So, you know, the flip side...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this guy is just kind of making shit up at a certain point here.
Of political influence is accountability to the public, and that is now gone. And you have people like, Stork or the FBI lovebirds, like essentially saying they're the charge of the United States and they're going to determine presidential election outcomes. And
Again, this is hyper partisan lunacy. Like, oh, the real people deciding the outcomes of it's not votes. It's the deep state.
use the power of their office. So we have a lot of wayward bureaucrats, and it's really harming the public. These jobs here in Washington, the average pay is well above $100,000. They have gold-plated health plans. They have
because we all know people who work for the federal government all live in Washington D.C. It's not like they live elsewhere. Nope, no sir.
pensions which are cost adjusted over time. None of this is enjoyed by folks in the private sector. I was an attorney in New York. Every morning I got up, I had to perform, or I could be excused. But the federal bureaucrat coming in.
Yep, as we all know, if you're hired by the government, you can just not do your job. You can just show up and play Tetris all day. That's how that works.
For the most part, doesn't face that kind of pressure. And what's more
Hey,
is
Alameda Express.
that they kind of work together to exclude outside direction. And that can't be said of all. There are, to be sure, a large swath of dedicated public servants. And to them, I also say to you, to them, it's like we're trying to make life better for you. Because if you've ever been in a large organization and seen a loafer or someone not pulling his or her weight and they're getting advanced, that's really frustrating to the quality individual. So this reform that we're talking about needs to happen. Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt was a big reformer. And we take a lot. This is the arena, and we're going to, back to our caller there in Tennessee, we are not going to dismantle the federal government, but we're going to do large-scale renovation to it. This city on the hill that we've been building, it needs to get rebuilt, and it needs to be built better on its constitutional architecture.
All right, back to the phone lines. Carol in New York, Democratic line.
I have a question about your funding of who supports your group, because from what I've read, you're a climate denying organization and you get billions of dollars from ExxonMobil, and you just don't care about the environment. You're opposed to every clean energy thing. So that's, to me, if we don't have a world to live in.
God bless the good-hearted people who call into C-SPAN.
That's just the end. I mean, anyway, tell me if that's true or not. Do you get $413 billion from Exxon?
No, we don't get that. We're actually supported by grassroots callers like yourself.
Bullshit. I'm sorry, unless your grassroots callers are goddamn Koch brothers over here.
It's a great misconception. The energy lobby is, if anything, supporting a lot of the Green New Deal. Ultimately, they want to have a monopoly on energy, whatever the case may be, and the constricting of it. I think what's really
Justin freaking
dangerous,
used to call into C-SPAN. I can see that.
And respectfully, a lot of this can be mischaracterized as hyperbole, but the way the energy lobby and kind of the Green New Deal is headed is really to the inurement of those billionaires, the guys who are not listening to C-SPAN, the people who rather are awakening in Martha's Vineyard and various beach resorts this weekend. Those are the people flying in and out of the private jets, hobnobbing with John Kerry, who are coming up with these plans.
And as we all know, that's all the average working people of Washington,
To build more Chinese windmills and solar panels and basically do away with the combustion engine. Who's gonna feel the brunt of that? It's gonna be.
Yep, no more combustion engines. That's Joe Biden's America. What the fuck are you talking about, dude?
The mom and pop voter. It's going to be the nurse who has to drive 50 miles to her job. This great inflation that we see every day you go to the grocery store, where does that come from? It comes from the increase in the price of energy, which is the biggest determinant. And I can say this.
It's not actually that it's not. It's neither the biggest determinant nor where most of the inflation is coming from right at the moment. What does hobnobbing mean? I don't know where it came from. I don't know the etymology, but hobnobbing is just like, rubbing elbows with the elite.
As someone who studied economics at MIT, at the tutelage of Nobel Prize winners, it's a very complex equation to balance. And a lot of what's being thrown up right now is neither going to be effective, and it's going to be potentially disastrous. And we're talking about putting more cars on the grid at the same time taking the energy off the grid, all the while, China and other nations are continuing to build coal-fired power plants. So, and Canada burns its forest. So whatever good people think is being accomplished is really making a lot of Washington-connected people extremely wealthy. And for us in the long term could be disastrous.
Let's go to Durham, North Carolina now. Anthony calling on the independent line.
Yes, Mr. Dans. Good morning to you. I'm curious why or how do you feel that the January 6th insurrection or treasonous act that was perpetuated against the state capitol, the federal government and the people of America, how you feel like that was not an actual treasonous act and it has been exacerbated by the Democratic Party when it was perpetrated by the vast majority of the Republican Party.
I don't think any of us really know what happened yet on January 6th. And
no one really
what
knows
what happened there with the January 6th.
It's just so confusing. It's just so confusing what happened on January 6th.
This commission was completely one-sided. Ultimately, this narrative is going to collapse. There are some really interesting things that have been kind of suppressed, I think, when you look at the media and what you look at the courts and the Biden DOJ. But certainly, what was the role of the federal government itself in January 6th? I can only say as someone serving at the time, and watching in the summer of 2020, the White House get ransacked. And we were literally trying to do our jobs, and we were told we had to go home from our federal buildings routinely because of protesters. They would clear out people from the Treasury Department. This part of the story isn't really told, that the government got shut down in the summer of 2020. And, as far as
Did they invade the Capitol building in 2020? I don't recall that, actually.
Who's responsible? We do have a First Amendment, and that applies equally to the president as, the person, the custodian in the White House. So to be able to speak freely, to petition your government, these are key rights. And I think a real, intellectually honest examination of the events of January 6th is going to tell quite a different narrative.
All right,
we had to shut down the government because, a massive plague came through. It almost killed everybody.
Caller Connie in Picking, Illinois, Republican line.
Yes. Now, I'm not black, but I am a half-breed Cherokee, a half-breed Chickasaw, and because of one full-blood Hebrew grandpa, I'm also a half-breed Jew.
Half-breed. Okay.
This DOJ, I didn't know anything about the Proud Boys, but the Proud Boys are comprised of whites and blacks. And the black guy Wednesday that the Department of Justice wanted to give 33 years in prison for his participation in January 6th. The man wasn't even at the Capitol on January 6th. They had already warned him a couple of days before that he could not be there January 6th, and he wasn't. This DOJ is flat letting blacks know you don't stand up for Republicans. Now, if people want to go along with this and say, oh, that's great, that's fine. The one shaman that
Connie, we're running out of time. I'm going to have to stop you there.
We're going to have to
give you
talk to you later.
Just a few seconds. Any final thoughts?
Well, Connie, we all want to get the truth of what happened January 6th. There were certainly strange things that the DOJ is not apparently interested in, people taking down fences, people encouraging them to walk into the Capitol with megaphones. When the identities of those people are known, I think we're going to see a lot of different, the unfortunate...
yes, the weak-willed January 6th, Capitol stormers were simply coerced by the Chad and mentally superior Antifa super soldiers. What an amazing narrative.
Thing is, it does send a message to people that you shouldn't criticize the government. You cannot question an election. You cannot get involved in an election at pain of these terrible, almost political prisoners who are taken now. They're held in solitary confinement, never given a trial date. These are things, had it happened in any other country, our State Department would be roundly denouncing. So I agree. This is the heart. This is why I became a lawyer. This sort of, I have a deep, abiding sense in fair play and substantial justice, and I submit to you what going on right now is a dark history. That said, you got to keep the faith. You got to stand up. You got to keep moving forward and speaking your voice. And I encourage everyone here to do that on a local level and make sure these elections are the free and fair ones that every American deserves, left, right, center.
All right. We've been talking this morning with Paul Dans of the Heritage Foundation about the 2025 Presidential Transition Project. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you to you.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. Later on Washington Journal, Aaron Heenan.
No, we're good. We good. We're done. No, this is an interesting link, by the way. Thank you for sending it over, Trans Girl Jade. Again, like these people, like the Heritage Foundation, and keep in mind, Project 2025 is funded by and pushed by over 70 different conservative organizations in addition to the Heritage Foundation. But it's funded primarily by the Koch brothers, but you can look. Here's a full list of funders. We got the Sarah Scaife Foundation, sending $27.5 million to the Heritage Foundation. You got the Howard Charitable Foundation sending $19.3 million to the Heritage Foundation. Like, it's just organization after organization after organization sending millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars towards this group. It's deeply, deeply corrupt, frankly. And this project has the potential to destroy democracy. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not trying to scaremonger or fearmonger. It's just the reality. This is one of the most dangerous conservative proposals I've seen in a very, very long time. And it's something to be aware of going forward. I'm going to try and synthesize more of this information because, again, like it was said, it's a very comprehensive document. If any of you want to check it out for yourselves, I'm going to copy and paste it into chat. Here you guys go. Post it in all the chats. I came because of Elon Musk. Wow, I didn't know he was a great lover. Um, sorry. 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 But folks, if you've enjoyed the stream, please, please, please hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button on the YouTube stream, and consider dropping some subs or donos, because those help me to live and to not die. And I like doing those things. I came at the wrong time. Bisky, it's okay. It happens to the best of us. Sometimes we're just a little overeager. You'll get it next time, buddy. Hey, Colossus TV. All right. All right. I didn't hit like. I have sinned. Well, you can fix that right now. You could literally right now. You can fix it. All right. I am going to go to bed because I have a lot of stuff I need to do tomorrow. And I just did a 7-hour long stream. Thank you all for hanging out with me for the whole thing.